Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.
Hello and welcome back to Undercurrent. I'm Christy Molliker. Well, next up, Sarah Miller sheds some light on a rather rare disease.
Reflex sympathetic dystrophy, otherwise known as RSD, is a chronic pain condition believed to be the result of dysfunction in the central or peripheral nervous systems. It is generally triggered by a physical injury. To find out more, we spoke to experts on the condition, Dr. Murray and sports physio Laura Wentworth.
It's a medical condition, and it's a serious medical condition where the tissues of a part of the body, usually around bones and joints, become very disturbed, either after trauma or injury usually, of some sort, and then the nerve tissue, particular types of nerve tissue, become unusual in that they start spontaneously firing off messages and causing disturbance of the tissues, sometimes long after the injury's gone away. Most of us know about our nervous system. It's what moves our muscles and why we can feel things when we touch. But we have very small nerve fibres called autonomic nerves, which control our blood pressure, our colour, and sweating, and they get disturbed by pain in a very unusual way. We don't think about our autonomic nerves at all until they're abnormal.
For example, if you sprained your ankle and you came in and was treating your ankle injury, and then further down the track, as you were improving, you developed RSD, which means now you've got more pain, more swelling, and the joint is now stiff again, so I have to deal with that first before I can actually deal with the ankle injury.
You often see it, interestingly, in very athletic people. People who are very, what we call perhaps hypermobile, very stretchy or bendy type of people. Their tissues are more lax and their autonomic nervous system is probably differently tuned, so they're particularly prone after an injury. It seems sort of, out of all the cases we've seen, 70 or 80% of them are these very hypermobile, bendy, stretchy people, what you might call double jointed. So that puts them at risk.
I was a dancer. I danced like 3 times a week, twice a week sometimes, and yeah, just a simple dance probably overstretched a limb or a muscle or something, and just from there we don't quite know what happened.
While most cases of RSD will only last up to 1 to 3 months, some cases are a lot more severe.
At first it was just swelling, then my knee went sort of a bluey purple colour, and then it started going really sensitive to touch, so you couldn't touch it, it was hard to move it, and yeah, just sort of things like that. And it was hot and cold, and like heat would burn it and cold would make it feel like it was going to freeze, like sort of really weird things that obviously isn't normal with a common injury. So that's when we were like, okay, it's something.
For a lot of people, it's this extremely frightening pain experience, so you must deal with that and give them a handle on it and an understanding of why it's happened, and to understand how they can modify it and improve it.
Is there any type of medication you can go on, or is it just physical physiotherapy?
I have been on certain medications, and they made me go a bit loopy because they were quite strong, and being on them at such a young age probably wasn't the best idea.
Any medicine that works always has the potential for side effects. There are no medicines that won't potentially have side effects, and in some people they tend to be very sensitive to these sorts of medicines. They can get quite a degree of, I suppose, difficulty with concentration and a bit of mood disorder, and in those people you have to limit your use. You can only use very tiny doses.
My mum's there for me, and I'm kind of, I've had it for 7 years now, so kind of just live with it and still do what I need to do and stuff like that.
Unfortunately for RSD patients, there is still no exact known cause or cure for the condition. This is Sarah Miller and Jasmine York reporting for Undercurrent.
Did you know Australia has a brand new embassy? And it's made completely from tents, although not official. Well, just yet anyway. Janae Tomlinson investigates.
January 26 marks the 40th anniversary of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy in Canberra. Many activists and supporters from around the country are going over for the event to bring attention to issues the Indigenous community are still facing today.
Whenever governments seem to talk about issues in relation to Aboriginal people, it's always referred to as the problem. It's very, very difficult and getting really worse in 2011 to be able to attract any sort of support and funding for Aboriginal type programs.
We want to tell them that we want change. That sorry, Kevin Rudd's sorry business hasn't gone wide enough. He just said sorry and that's it. Nothing happened. We're still being locked up, we're still dying in custody, we're still dying too young.
Aboriginal women are now the fastest growing prison population in Australia, so our state maximum security prison is now 50% Aboriginal women, most of whom experience sexual assault as children and domestic violence in their life.
One of the issues in which Aboriginal people need to be able to pursue is sovereignty and of course our rights to land. This land was never conceded in terms of being given over to an invading force. This was taken by means of massacres, genocide and the welfare of people, not only from land but children from their parents, and they were institutionalised into mission.
We are still refugees in our own land. I look back upon that hard life that I've come through. See where my mother, she was taken away from her tribe. Dad had to get permission off the chief protector. What a joke. Get permission to marry the one you love.
I think it's a really important process for young Aboriginal people to be able to recognise that this struggle for our human rights and our issues dealing with our humanity has been strong and has been going for such a long period of time. And the very first symbolic of the tent embassy was actually a beach umbrella put into the ground for shade, and obviously the issues that were raised was the issue of the Gurindji people's walk off at Wave Rock, and also land rights issues in this country, along with issues dealing with self-determination and sovereignty.
It is very important that that embassy has stood there all these years since 1970, I think it was. A lot of my people, young Aboriginal people, locked up in jails. Drugs and alcohol are just taking over. Well, let the government give us control of our own. Let us elders, the wise men, direct our people.
What we see routinely is it's still governments who have power and control over Aboriginal communities, that it's largely non-Aboriginal bureaucrats, and that decisions are imposed.
We are sober-minded. We keep an open mind. We see all this. We see the alcohol abuse, the violence, the drugs, the environment, the kids roaming the street. Give us our own self-determination. Let us build our own way so we can take these kids off the street, because there's been a lot of neglect of children, money being spent on drug and gambling and junk food, drugs. Kids get no education. There were no plans to establish a deputy commissioner's role. Commissioner for Children and Young People, Michelle Scott, said her role included advising on how the community and department could better protect children, youth, particularly Aboriginal children. She doesn't understand one thing about Aboriginal people. How can she sit down and talk to an Indigenous person about their culture? We need a strong Aboriginal person in there, woman or male or female, that we recommend.
People start to realise and got the courage, if you like, to confront the truth of how this country's been colonised and what it's meant in terms of the affluency of white Australia's so-called milk and honey, and what that has been achieved on in terms of the blood loss of our great peoples. And of course, in some cases where that land can't be given back, have a proper compensatory process where all of the natural resources that are capitalised on and taken from the land, that Aboriginal people get a proper shared in wealth of that.
No, we're not talking about giving back all the land that, cities and where things have been built on, but at least the ownership and the recognition of prior ownership to this country.
I can forgive but never forget. We never had diaries, but we all kept it here.
Hopefully the 40th year anniversary of the Aboriginal Tent Embassy will bring much needed attention and even change to the issues Indigenous people are facing today. I'm Janae Tomlinson, reporting for Undercurrent.
Well, next up, John Hammond sat down for a chat at the Court Wine Bar with one of my most favourite people of all time, my former boss and the person I aspire to be, Mr. Max Kay.
Max Kay, thank you for joining me at the Court Wine Bar this afternoon.
A pleasure. I'm not normally in court wine bars or any wine bars, as a matter of fact, John.
Max, the tables are now turned, aren't they?
Yes, I only came because it was you.
Because it was only several years ago that you had a role on local radio.
That's right.
And you were interviewing people about local government.
Yes, I was.
Max, I still seem to think that you are in the local government.
People do phone me and say, can you get something done with my bin? They do phone me even now, and I tell them I've not been in local government since 2007.
But Max, the question is, do you miss it?
Probably for about 5 minutes I missed it. And I was very fortunate, I think, because I maintained most of the committees I was on, and the ones that I didn't, I've really got back again. Like I was on the Perth Theatre Trust, and I was off that committee for a few years, but I'm back on that committee again. I'm on the Swan Bells Foundation, which was still there, St Bartholomew's, Royal Perth Hospital Heritage Society. Perth has been a wonderful place for me, and it wasn't that I wasn't successful when I was home in Britain, but Perth has just been a marvellous, it's been a real eye-opener, and there's so many things happened to me here in Perth. First of all, I ran the Civic Theatre.
And what went on at the Civic Theatre, for those who are listening?
Well, the Civic Theatre was a kind of review, a modern-day topical review, with singing and dancing and comedy sketches.
Did you ever perform whilst you were at the Civic Theatre?
That was it. The 9:05 show really was me. We brought all the other people in, like the Ronnie Corbetts and the Phyllis Dillers and the Max Bygraves. We brought them in, but basically the show, and the most popular show by far, was 9:05, and I was the star of that.
And what happened at 9:05? What did you do?
I'm a character comedian. That's what I started. I started as a rock and roller, believe it or not, years and years ago, and I did very well in rock and roll, but I realised that the longevity wasn't there, so I turned to comedy because I always had a kind of comedic flair.
Max, a few quick questions about the city of Perth that I'm going to ask a number of people, and that is, how do you feel about the Perth Convention Centre?
I think it's functional.
Do you think it's attractive?
No, as a design, it's hideous, absolutely hideous.
How do you feel about the Perth Bell Tower?
I love the Bell Tower. I'm on the foundation of the Bell Tower, so you're not going to get me saying it's not. I think it's a wonderful idea, and it was a pity that it became a political football and was allowed to be the size it is. It should have been twice the size.
What about the waterfront development at Barrack Street?
I'm not crazy about the waterfront development at Barrack Street. I think it's a pity that we have to destroy the Esplanade. I don't think it's the right way to go. And if you look at very successful waterfront developments, and one of them is, of course, South Bank in Melbourne, there is very, very little there. The government provided maybe a 2 or 3 story building at the front, which were things that the public could interact with food halls and lovely restaurants and gift shops and various other things. And all the other rest of the infrastructure was filled in by private enterprise. I don't know that a government really need to go to the trouble of building huge buildings and surround an area with huge office buildings.
And what do you say to people that criticise Perth for being a dull city?
Oh, rubbish, utter rubbish. I mean, wherever you go, I mean, if you go to Melbourne at night, Melbourne's not open at night. I mean, all these shops are closed and they don't stay open till all hours of the night.
And Max, with an accent like yours, do you support an AFL football team?
Don't tell me. I do, but don't tell me I've got an accent.
You do have an accent.
A Scottish
accent.
accent.
Before we leave, Max, what is that team?
I'm an Eagles man.
Oh, fantastic, Max. We can get on forever now. Max, thanks for
coming. Are you an Eagles fan?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I could kiss you now.
True blue. Thanks for coming to the Court Wine Bar this afternoon.
My pleasure. If I ever need help, will you defend me?
I certainly will, Max.
Well, I might have said some slanderous things here. I might need defence.
No, I'll make sure it's wiped.
Thank you.
And a big thank you once again to Mr. Max Kay, always a consummate professional. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Undercurrent, but we of course would love to hear your feedback. So why don't you follow us on Facebook or on Twitter, or visit our website wtvperth.com.au. I'm Christy Molliger, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you next week right here on Perth's very own Undercurrent.
Undercurrent, sponsored by John Hughes in Victoria Park. Choose your station before you choose your program. Absolutely.